Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. A lot of you guys who follow me on Twitter know I was at CES in Vegas. I've already had the opportunity to have a hands-on with the mouse. Getting this off of an eBay listing and having it in hand, testing it in game, it definitely provides a different perspective. I want to be able to take this in game, stress test it for several hours, see how I perform. One of the biggest things on the channel is, do I perform better? Do I stay the same as far as my consistent top level? Or do I play worse? In terms of the Pulsefire Haste, it was never an experience that I really connected with. I didn't like the holes, didn't like the skates, and just didn't like the feeling of the overall mouse. Quite surprisingly, the Pulsefire Haste 2 actually feels good in game, feels good in my hand. I think the refresh here, removing the holes on the top shell, keeping the mouse at 60 grams, it just feels feather light, and it does have a pretty hefty battery, getting it advertised up to 100 hours of consistent use. Personally, I think the mouse feels really good in hand, probably better than it does at that price point, meaning it definitely feels as though it is along the lines of what you would expect from a more expensive mouse from either Razer or Logitech. So I think the build quality here is good. And I think, again, if you're somebody who doesn't connect to other sized mice in this bracket, the Vaxi XE, the Starlight 12 Medium, the Pulsar X2, you could potentially have an opportunity to get something that might meet your needs a little bit better if you want something along that size bracket and those other mice didn't work for you. So overall, a pretty good mouse. I definitely want to get into the comparisons, the performance, the build quality, and then give you guys my closing thoughts. Let's get into it. If you are somebody who owns one of the other mice on the pad other than the Haste 2 and they almost hit the mark for you, the Haste 2 could be a pretty viable option to at least try. Let's get into a little bit of the differences and what direction I think you should move if you just missed the mark. If you're somebody who owned the Starlight 12 Medium and you needed it to be a little bit wider, a little bit longer, about the same height, the Haste 2 could be a pretty viable option for you. If you're somebody who is used to the Viper Ultimate, you felt it was a little bit too long and something maybe a little bit too flat, the Haste 2 could be a viable option for you. It feels as though the grip width is about the same moving from the Haste to the Razer Viper Ultimate, but right here, at least on my size hands, right in between here, the hump on the Haste 2 actually hits me a little bit better, and I almost feel when that happens, I get a more stable base on a mouse and I get more consistent. I play very well with all four of these mice. They're kind of still along the same category. That feeling also in between my middle finger and index finger on the bottom side of my palm, I actually get that same stability on the Vaxi XE, which right now is still my main mouse. I do feel that if you're somebody who owned the Vaxi XE, you felt that you liked the grip width, but you wanted something a little bit less bulbous feeling under your hand, the Haste 2 could be a pretty solid option for you. Overall, they are somewhat similar in size. They just feel quite different in terms of a mouse feel perspective. So while I would put all of these in the same bracket, I don't think that one of these is a clone to the other. They are all quite different in terms of their shape and overall feel in game. But in terms of if something in this bracket kind of sort of worked for you, but you're just missing a little bit something, again, depending on what direction you're moving, the Haste 2 could be pretty solid for you. In terms of performance, I can almost kind of combine this with a build quality segment. The performance on the mouse happened to be quite good for me, paired with the Razer Atlas, which is the mousepad I've recently come off testing and reviewing. I'll definitely throw up clips on my left during this segment, but I do want to throw out there that the Hyperx Haste 2 is advertised as using a 26K sensor. It is probably a modified 3370 or a 3395. I don't know which one. If somebody was to tell me it was a 95 or tell me it was a 70, it wouldn't make me play any better or worse. The sensor feels great, the mouse feels snappy, the switches feel good. In terms of the switches, they do feel like Kale 8.0s from my Fantech Aria. I don't believe they are Kale 8.0s. I think HyperX is using their own switches now. What they are, I'm not too sure. They just have a similar feel to my Fantech Aria. In terms of pre and post travel, mouse 1 and mouse 2, there's nothing that I've noticed in game. There's no side flex I noticed in game. The only thing with mouse 2 that I would say is I did notice that if I kind of push pretty abruptly and release, there's just a tiny bit of rattle on mouse 2. Nothing that I would take issue with in game, nothing that would make me perform any better or worse. In terms of the main issue I have with the mouse, the side buttons just have a heck load of a lot of post travel, but it's almost like a tight post travel. So you have the actuation of the switch, and then if you keep pushing, the button does want to travel down deep into the shell of the mouse. If you push hard enough, it's almost like that plastic wants to pop off on the inside of the shell. But it's not something that feels overly mushy, if that makes sense, because of that tightness as you continue to push into the mouse past the actuation. Overall, it doesn't feel horrible compared to a lot of mice that have mushy side buttons, but that is the worst issue I would say I have on the mouse, which certainly is not that bad. Shell integrity is extremely good. If you're a death gripper, you're not going to be flexing. At least I was not. I don't feel the shell budging or moving at all. The only area where I did have flex was the bottom shell, but that's only when you're applying direct pressure, which you're not going to be doing in game, so I don't think it's going to be an issue. It is a 500 mAh battery, so you might get the advertised battery life, but I doubt that you will get absolutely 100 hours of consistent use, and certainly that advertised time will be with the RGB on the scroll wheel off, which takes me to the scroll wheel. It actually feels quite good. It has this tight, well-defined steps, but something that also feels very almost silent and subdued. It's not something like a Zowie scroll wheel, which is just like cranking and roaring in your ear. And Mouse 3 does have a nice, almost like silent feeling deep thought to it. And everything about it is very spammable, very usable in terms of tap strafing in game and Apex. Overall, these skates are an improvement, and actually they almost feel like Tiger Arc V2s or the Death Adder V3 default skates. Overall, definitely an improvement, and something that actually feels really nice paired with glass. The audible level of the grind is actually reduced. That could be a result of the shape of the skates or the height of the skates, but overall, an extremely good pairing with glass, and something that is actually quite smooth, would probably pair nicely with cloth as well. And of course, you do have the DPI button on the top of the mouse, and the weight is as advertised at 60 grams. And I would say here the weight balance actually is extremely well done. When you are gliding around your mouse pad, you feel very evenly distributed. I've never noticed weight being kind of towards one end or the other. When you start picking it up and moving it around, you maybe feel the weight a hair more towards the butt of the mouse, but overall the weight balance here is extremely well done. Also, the coating here feels pretty good out of the box. It stays dry. It's almost like a smooth PBT keycap is how I would describe the feeling of the surface itself, but definitely does not get that effect of like a wet bar of soap. So out of the box, the coating, the grip that you get from it, it's actually quite good. Overall, the only issue that did feel a little in game were the side buttons. So guys, the price to me on eBay was $89.99. At that price point, I do think it's fair for the performance that I'm feeling of the mouse, the quality that I'm feeling. In terms of the price to you guys, though, I do think that it is going to be $79.99 on Amazon. I could be incorrect about that. Again, I was fortunate enough to find this on an eBay listing. But do I think that it will fill a pretty good spot on the market? I do think that it will for the price. It performs really nice. It feels nice. And again, if one of the other options doesn't work for you, or if you're just a huge fan of the original Pulsefire Haste, go ahead and give it a shot. I think it's great. That's it for this one, guys. If it helped, please leave a sub to the channel. I'll see you guys in the next review. Peace.